Pre-Spanish era to Spanish era, ways of living and government. Pre-Spanish era pertains to a period in a particular nation's history that was not yet colonized by Spain. There are three social classes during the pre-Spanish era. The nobles, who were composed of rulers and their families. They occupied the highest class, and they were usually addressed as Gat, Lakan, Raha, or Datu. The second one is freemen. Freemen are the working class, while the slave were classified into two, the aliping namamahay and the aliping sa gigilid. Aliping namamahay were not full-fledged slaves. They had their own respective families and their own houses. They were required to serve their masters only during planting and harvesting period. Aliping sa gigilid were the real slaves. They were homeless, forbidden to form their own families, required to stay in their master's dwelling, and they could be used as payment for debt. Clothing during pre-Spanish period. Male clothing consisted of the upper and lower parts. The upper part was a jacket with short sleeves called kangan, while the lower part was a strip of cloth wrapped around the waist and in between the legs called bahag. Male used a piece of cloth or a headgear called putong. Putong symbolizes the number of persons the wearer had killed. On the other hand, female wore baro or kamisa. It is a jacket with leaves, and the lower part was called saya. Government. During the pre-Spanish period, the government was called barangay. There was no national government, and it was headed by a ruler called datu or raha. The power and functions of datu. Datu implements laws, maintaining peace and order, giving protection to his subject. He also made the law and acted as a judge during trial. And based on what I have searched online for additional information, it was easy for the datu to run for the barangay since the population was very small. Taxation. Ancient Filipinos started the practice of paying taxes. Non-payment of taxes was already punishable during this period, and the collected tax was called buwis. So what is the purpose of taxation during the pre-Spanish period? The purpose of paying taxes was simple. It was for protection they received from the datu. Alliances. Like Community of Nations, alliances among barangays were formed, and alliances was sealed through blood compact. The purpose of forming alliances was for trade, peace, and mutual protection. And they were using the blood compact, or what we call the sanduguan, to ensure conformity, sincerity, and commitment of the chieftains. Trial and determination of guilt. Judicial process was influenced by religion. They waited for the intervention of the deities, and their judicial process was called by trial by ordeal. And one of the example of their judicial process is holding lighted candles by the suspected offenders. The man whose candle died out first would be declared as the culprit. And another form of this trial was ordering the suspect to plunge into deep river with their lances. The first come to the surface would be adjudged as the guilty party. So now let us all move on to Spanish era. Social classes in the Philippines during Spanish period. First is the Peninsulares. Peninsulares is the highest class in the Philippines. They are pure-blooded Spaniards born from Spain. the wealthiest and most politically powerful among the social classes. They had high position in the government and they were referred as Castillas. Insulares. Insulares are Spaniards born in the Philippines, receives discrimination from fellow Spaniards, but they enjoy various government and church positions. Ilustrados. Ilustrados constituted the Filipino educated class during the Spanish colonial period in the late 19th century. They were the middle class who were educated in Spanish and exposed to Spanish liberal and European nationalist ideals. Principalia. Principalia is a nobility class. It was the social and educated class in the towns of colonial Philippines composed of the gobernadorcillo or the cabeza de barangay who governed the districts and the awardees of the Medal of Civil Merit. Mestizos. Mestizos are Filipinos of mixed indigenous Filipino, Austronesian people, Malay or Malayo-Polynesian, or European or Chinese ancestry. The mestizos has three types. Mestizos de Sangley, the person of mixed Chinese and Filipino ancestry. Mestizo de Español, person of mixed Spanish and Filipino ancestry. And lastly is the Tornatras. Tornatras are the person of mixed Spanish, Filipino, and Chinese ancestry. Lastly is Indios. Indios are person of pure Austronesian, Malay or Malayo-Polynesian ancestry or natives. Clothing during Spanish period. Throughout the 16th century up to the 18th century, women wore a Hispanicized version of balot saya. Balot saya is composed of a bodice called a camisa, often made in pineapple fiber or muslin, and a floor-length skirt, while the men wore the balong Tagalog or the barong Tagalog, a collared and button-laced shirt or a suit. Filipino women during Spanish era. They have no freedom to studies in the universities, together with male, but they were permitted to engage in businesses. They were kept in seclusion at home or in school exclusively for girls. The political structure during Spanish period. Spain established a centralized colonial government in the Philippines that was composed of a national government and the local governments that administered provinces, cities, town, and municipalities. The national government maintained peace and order, collected taxes, and built schools and other public works. The Gobernador General. The first one was Miguel Lopez de Legazpi from 1965 to 1572, and the last was Diego de los Rios, 1898. The Governor General is the king's representative and the highest-ranking official in the Philippines. Royal decrees and laws emanating from Spain were implemented in the Philippines. The Gobernador General had the power to appoint and dismiss public officials, except those personally chosen by the king. It also supervised all government offices in the collection of taxes. The Gobernador General exercised certain legislative powers and issued proclamation to facilitate and implementation of laws. The Governor General and other government officials had so much power that it was commonly abused. To investigate the abuses, there were bodies created: the Residencia, the Visita, and the Royal Audiencia. The Residencia. The Residencia is a special judicial court that investigates the performance of a Governor General who was about to be replaced. The residential of which incoming Governor General was usually a member submitted a report of findings to the king. The Visita. The Council of the Indies in Spain sent a government officially called the Visitador General to observe conditions in the colony. The Visitador General reported his findings directly to the king. And lastly is the highest court in the land, the Royal Audiencia. The Royal Audiencia served as an advisory body to the Governor General. It had the power to check and report on his abuses. It also sent a yearly report to Spain. The Archbishop and other government officials could also report the abuses of the colonial. But despite all these checks, however, an abusive Governor General often managed to escape suspension or dismissal by simply bribing the Visitador and other investigators. The provincial government. The Spaniards created local government units or the LGU for the provinces. There were two types of local government units, the Alcaldia or the Alcalde Mayor and Corregimiento or the Corregidor. The Alcaldia, led by the Alcalde Mayor, governed the provinces that had been fully subjugated or under Spanish control. Duties of the Alcalde Mayor. They represented the Spanish king and the Governor General. They managed the day-to-day operation of the provincial government and implemented laws and supervised the collection of taxes. While the Corregimiento, headed by Corregidor, governed the provinces that were not yet entirely under Spanish control. The Alcaldia and the Corregimiento, though they were paid a small salary, they enjoyed privileges such as indulto de comercio or the right to participate in the galleon trade. Under the municipal government, there is a gobernadorcillos and cabeza de barangay or the barrio administrator or what we called barangay captain. Gobernadorcillos had small salaries but they are exempted from paying the taxes. Each province was divided into several towns or pueblos, and it was headed by gobernadorcillos. The main duties of the gobernadorcillos is to maintain the efficient governance and tax collection. While the cabeza de barangay is responsible for the peace and order of the barrio. They are also recruiting men for public works. Next is the city government. Larger towns became cities called ayuntamiento. It became the center of the trade and industry. The ayuntamiento had a city council called the cabildo. And the cabildo is composed of alcalde or the mayor, regidores or the councilors, alguacil mayor or the police chief, and the escribando, the secretary.